I think Ten Hag doesn't have many places to hide really, because United really provided him with most of what he's wanted. No manager get everything they want in the transfer market, but United have gone above and beyond to provide for him, really.
Despite a 2-week break for international commitments across the globe, Manchester United have remained ever present in the daily headlines. We've got everything from Ronaldo and Rio to unfortunate individual displays and managerial conversations, and the small matter of a trip to Southampton. That and more in the latest episode of The Theatre of Red. Hello and welcome to you all. Thank you once more for your continued support and your commitment to my weekly ramblings. As we count down the minutes until tomorrow's 12:30 fixture in Southampton, we might just have time to breathe for a couple of seconds following a typically busy 2-week period for Manchester United. Now, alongside me today to chat about this Northwest soap opera is a man that I admire greatly. A veteran reporter for the 20-time English champions across such publications as The Athletic, Forbes, The Times, 442, and many more. Mr. Sam Pilger, how is everything, my friend?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Very well. Looking forward to the football restarting. International breaks are a strange beast that I don't particularly enjoy, as most fans don't. So it'd be good to get back into the swing of the Premier League season and the Cup starting as well.
Here. It cannot come quick enough. Before we get into it all, from your first posting on the official Manchester United magazine back in the 90s to present day, where Sir Jim Ratcliffe is orchestrating a very public facelift to the first team squad, to the backroom team, and the mighty infrastructure that's going to house all of them. You, Sam, as a supporter first, are witnessing the greatest shift in mentality that the club has experienced in close to 2 decades. Now, it's perfectly reasonable for supporters to be slightly alarmed, aggrieved even, following back-to-back Premier League defeats, particularly with the nature of what we witnessed against Liverpool at the beginning of September. However, before we dive into some of this Portuguese cuisine that has been placed across the media, we have seen a dramatic shake-up of the first-team squad with multiple bodies exiting, a host of systematic players purchased to accommodate a new mentality and a new way of approaching the footballing side at Old Trafford. Given everything that has occurred in the summer regarding Erik ten Hag, the best-in-class backroom team and the aforementioned squad, I would love to get Sam Pilger's take on Manchester United Football Club today, and if you are ultimately happy as we approach game week 4 in the Premier League.
I think I'm happy with the changes that were made in the summer. I mean, the Glazers are still the majority owners, which is regrettable. Although I think we dodged a bullet as a fan base, and me personally with Qatar not taking over, the mysterious sheikh taking over. I think that would have brought several conflicts of interest, and that would be an awful on the back of the World Cup and human rights issues. I think that would have split the fan base. So I think Sir Jim Ratcliffe, and who's not a perfect individual by any means, taking over the club, but a Mancunian as well, and a United fan. I think, with the Glazers still in situ, we seem to have forgotten that, but we've been able to forget that because the brisk pace of change has been encouraging with the structure rule changes, and United have been crying out that for years. I mean, it was only when John Murtaugh appointed during lockdown, so 3 or 4 years ago, that United operated in this modern football world without a sporting director until he appeared, and people were a little bit dubious about his credentials, which was probably borne out, really. United didn't fare so well in the transfer market. So to get their number one choice, which was Dan Ashworth, as the sporting director, and obviously Omar Barreda, who enjoyed such success at City, Jason Wilcox, around the manager. The manager's now not on his own. So there are, that horrible phrase, but it's true, real football people around him. I feel confident. I felt confident approaching Wembley and Old Trafford, where I went for the first game against Fulham, and Wembley for the community Charity Shield, as I still call it. But yeah, it's so there is a lot of positivity. I think the transfer market has been very good, very good. I still concerned that probably one more body short in midfield and a striker, an experienced striker. But transfer markets or windows are never completely surgical. Does anybody get a complete shopping list of everything they want? I think the age profile, the experience, the potential of the 5 players United have signed is really good. I think it's not perfect, but yeah, but then the reality hits, and we've lost 3 out of. I say we as a fan, we've lost 3 out of our first 4 competitive games because the Charity Shield is a competitive game. You know, that goes on the honours board at Old Trafford. If you score in it, it goes in your season's total. It's not a pre-season friendly. It's a competitive game. It was against City at Wembley. And we lost. We lost on penalties, but we lost the game we should have won because we had Palestri at fullback at the back post, which seems bizarre. But yeah, 3 out of 4 defeats, and as I said, I want to include the Community Shield, and that's a huge concern. Obviously, that was on penalties. Fulham wasn't the greatest performance, but it was good. It was encouraging. You know, a debutant scoring there, a last-minute winner, a late winner, is a good Old Trafford story. It's very United. But then to lose at Brighton, and then the Liverpool result was really depressing. And yeah, I'm sure we'll talk about it. But you think, well, what's changed? So a lot's changed off the pitch, and that will take time, of course, and especially as Ashworth is only through the door, Barada's only through the door, Wilcox is new too. So we won't see the full. It won't come to fruition for several more transfer windows. I'm sure that's frustrating, but that's the reality. But it's a good start off the pitch. Sadly, on the pitch, it's the same old story.
I think you've pretty much covered my own feelings and the vast majority of the people that I know with that. The one thing I'd say to add on to that, Sir Jim Radcliffe obviously spoke in very, very minute spaces in the run up to him acquiring his share and beginning his work. And obviously, we had that Bloomberg interview when he was asked about his ideals in adhering to what Ralph Ranić suggested was an open heart operation. He did suggest it was going to take 2 to 3 summer windows to get where they wanted to be. And realistically, what we have seen this summer is a dramatic shake-up, given it's a very, very short period of time and it's really only a couple of weeks over 6 months since they've actually arrived. So I do think there's a lot more positive than negatives. I agree with you. It would have been nice to be able to address an experienced striker, another body in midfield that doesn't necessarily put fear into your soul and more so inspires you with confidence, particularly against Liverpool. But on that, obviously one of the largest topics that you mentioned there was 3 losses in 4 games. I think it'd be most rude of us not to kick off conversations today in discussing the hottest topic in world football at the moment in the meeting of Cristiano Ronaldo and Rio Ferdinand.
Yeah.
Now, Sam, ultimately there was nothing groundbreaking presented, and realistically speaking, we shouldn't be surprised by the interview or the nature of such. I mean, it's designed to attract attention and generate further publicity for a YouTube page. But amongst the many topics discussed, what was your take on the lack of perceived winning mentality that Ronaldo expressed towards Ten Hag? Because, in all honesty, you would want to be fairly deluded to think that Ten Hag doesn't want to win games and isn't aiming higher than the mediocrity that he is giving out in pressers. Surely, if he stated his side were contenders for the title this season, he would be declared as nothing more than a madman who is completely out of his depth.
Well, I agree. And if in the interview or the quotes I've seen in the interview, Ronaldo actually contradicts himself, where he talks about how can a Manchester United manager say they won't go for the Champions League and the Premier League. It did strike me, well, of course he's not saying he's going for the Champions League because United aren't in the Champions League this season. So again, there was a hole in his argument that season with that issue. And then in the interview, Ronaldo himself said, I can't see United winning the Premier League, the Champions League again, erroneously he added, or the Europa League. But so he's saying, hang on, so you expect the United managers to say they'll win the Premier League, but you yourself don't think they will. So come on, let's be consistent. So I think he lost himself a little bit. There was an argument. I do see the argument from a born serial winner like Ronaldo, who his last 3 seasons of his first spell won the Premier League. That United should always be challenging for the Premier League. They should be, but the reality of it is they're not this year. I mean, sadly, the team, it's still hard to believe the United finished 8th last season. Premier League challenge, nobody thought of that. To finish in the top 4 would be progress, which is sad because Ten Hag's first season he finished 3rd. So to say that would be progress is a bit of a shame. So I think Ronaldo. Look, we're a fickle lot. The way Ronaldo left United was appalling. Really, saying he had no respect for the manager and flouncing out. It was really poor. But I'm old enough to remember that. I don't remember, but as a United historian, things didn't end well. Well, obviously with George Best many years ago, he walked out on United many a time. He's still revered. There's the statue outside, so we're a forgiving lot. Ronaldo still has currency with fans, and obviously it made headlines. It's Ronaldo, but I think he got a bit confused and a bit lost. I agree with you, Shaun. There's no way Ten Hag would say we're going for the Premier League. You have to be realistic and temper expectations. Nobody expected that. But with the players he has at his disposal, top 4 should be a given, really. And the fact that it's not is problematic.
The biggest thing that reeked from all of those quotes was just contradiction after contradiction. You've covered one of them, but inevitably the man speaks about how a rebuild is required from the ground up. And then in the next breath, a manager shouldn't be saying that United shouldn't be challenging for top honours. Like myself, Sam, I mean, you clearly want nothing but the best for the club. Mm-hmm. You want the side to return to winning ways, and you want to allow your children to experience the unrivaled joy that we both aged with throughout the years of Sir Alex. When I look at it and I take a step back, I can appreciate the necessity to have club legends remain close to affairs. If for nothing more than what it symbolises. You mentioned George Best. We're obviously speaking about Cristiano Ronaldo, Rio Ferdinand. I've always been a firm believer for some time that the damaging nature of player power extends far beyond the Manchester United dressing room. And individuals, namely such as Paul Scholes, Rio Ferdinand, and obviously Ronaldo, they can have lasting ramifications on the squad and on the supporter base. We've discussed the embargoed information that an aggregator account decided to ignore, and Instagram posts that subsequently followed from the likes of Fabrizio Romano, and they were liked by Alejandro Garnacho. Now, all of this jargon, which is nothing more than an attempt to gain personal clout, has such damaging effects on the club through impressionable supporters all the way down to impressionable youngsters who are part of the first team. How do you feel about the almost daily ex-player input that is supplied to the football club and the damage that it can potentially cause in moving forward?
I mean, I think with Garnacho liking was it an Instagram post? I mean, I really don't think that was, here is my public criticism to Erik Ten Hag. Ten Hag has played him and really likes him, and he's flourished under him.
It's naivety, though, isn't it? It's
naivety. It is naivety, because you need to, we're wiser and older, and we look at the quotes and what is the context and what has he really said, because actually in his sort of very good English, but sort of stuttering English, Ronaldo, I had to read the quotes 2 or 3 times and to see what he was saying, and because he doesn't mention Ten Hag by name. So, and then I was saying, okay, right. But then, as we've said, he then agrees with Ten Hag that United can't win the Premier League, but he's having a go at him for saying he can't win it. United can't win it. So I don't know. Garnacho's obviously, I mean, in this day and age, a lot of us scan things. We scan a tweet. We shouldn't. We should look in detail. And he's looked at it and probably seen, Manchester United should always try and win the Premier League and the Champions League and aim for the stars and so on. He's just pressed like because Ronaldo is his hero and he's saying something, pretty obvious. So yeah, I think it's not his public opposition to Ten Hag at all. It's just a silly like, and you know, um, we've all done that probably, like something and not looked at the context quickly and realised our mistake. So yeah, I don't think. I think you saw after the cup final, which I think saved Ten Hag. Possibly that image, the two goal scorers in the image, that was Mainu and Garnacho, two players who flourished under him, and that hug. They obviously scored both the goals in the final, and that hug, that embrace they shared on the sideline. So Garnacho is somebody who's doing very well under Ten Hag. So I don't think that was anything but a mistake. Yeah.
That image has stood along with me. I wrote recently about the many similarities that I'm seeing in this squad and the players that are being brought in. They're systematic signings, is how I see it. And it's almost like jigsaw pieces or even chess pieces being put in the correct places to accommodate flourishing youth. You'll remember those years ago, United won the title. And then, in terms of what was a very, very perplexing situation for Alex Ferguson, you saw the departure of the likes of David Beckham 12 months after the likes of Dennis Irwin had passed on in the later part of his career. Ronnie Johnson, Laurent Blanc, all these guys walking away. And Ferguson identified Ronaldo. And then 12 months later, identified Wayne Rooney, saw fit to take the two of these youngsters and to build a football side around their talents. It was a project, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was a project that he sat about doing, and he said, look, there's obvious talent here and these guys can lead us forward. You see so much of it now with the likes of Mainu, with the likes of Garnacho, even Rasmus Højlund. I know he was purchased, but he's still in that sort of an age profile where when you can get those accurate chess pieces and place them systematically around these youngsters and allow them to flourish, ultimately you can benefit. And we saw a couple of seasons where United really lagged behind Arsenal and Chelsea, ultimately then go on to win a trio of titles and a Champions League title thereafter. It obviously just brings me on in something as well that I thought was another interesting topic, and it's more so what I'm aiming at, not more so Garnacho liking the post, but in the image and the fact that you have these ex-player figures so involved on a daily basis. With Ruud van Nistelrooy, I thought it was a strange point that Ronaldo decided to highlight because, for those who do not know, it was Ten Hag that suggested the former striker join his backroom team in the first place. The mere indication that a manager needs to listen to the input of his assistant to ensure that the team moves forward, to me, is not only silly, but it's also targeting those impressionable minds in the dressing room and outside who may start looking at the pair differently. I know the words succession planning have become very, very popular, largely due to the magnificent work that's completed at Brighton. And that goes hand in hand with the arrival of Dan Ashworth in Manchester. But many have painted a picture that sees Ruud replacing Erik when things inevitably go wrong. And furthermore, when you look at the likes of Rene Hake coming in, he's another manager who opted to assume a lesser role in a larger ocean. And he is more than capable of deputizing if and when required. So when I touch on this player power outside the dressing room, and given everything that we know about United in 2024, where do you stand on the suggestion that ex-superstars, they're pivotal to returning this side to the head of the table?
What you feel that the former United players like Ferdinand, Gary Neville, Paul Scholes, their role in the media has a sort of an undermining element? Then is that what you
Yeah.
think? Yeah, I think. I mean, hasn't it always been thus that the United have, because they have had the most successful and high profile players, they gravitate into punditry, Roy Keane, Scholes, Gary Neville, and Rio Ferdinand, even Owen Hargreaves, Michael Owen. I don't really think of as a former United player, but he's still got that platform too. So I don't know. I mean, I know there is actually more of an undercurrent with Gary Neville sometimes. United fans sort of are annoyed with him, and how he comments on United and so on. I think they have the best interest in their heart. I feel, they have seen success. They've been part of success, and want the best for United. I think it might undermine, but I feel it's almost a sideshow. If United are successful, we're not talking about them. If United suffer, we talk about them because we're more interested in what they have to say, and we go to those voices, and we see those voices on social media a lot more. and social media brings us all together. We could avoid these voices in the past, and now we can't, and we scroll through them. And especially in this break, in this 2 weeks, we sort of seek that out and hear them. And sometimes we get annoyed at them for just speaking the truth, and the truth has not been flattering about United this season or recently. So I don't know. I mean, I find the commentator, if United are losing, the commentator on the TV, like the main commentator, the Martin Tyler, the Pete and Drury, begins to annoy me. And if we're winning, I don't hear him. I don't hear what he says. Don't care what he says. But I hear every word, and it annoys me when we're losing. I think that's the same with the punditry class. So it doesn't bother me too much.
It's a very diplomatic answer, and I will accept it. That's perfectly fine. You've mentioned winning and losing. We're speaking now for about 20 minutes, and we're not really focusing on football. So the international break has thankfully concluded, for now anyway, and many of the first team squad are going to turn their attention to Southampton tomorrow. Both teams are obviously going to be hoping to kickstart their season. Russell Martin's side have endured a very difficult start to their life back in the Premier League with 3 defeats from as many outings. And equally, United must get a result following back-to-back defeats, with the necessity to start building some momentum ahead of a charge up the table. At the time of speaking, we're not yet privy on information regarding confirmation of availability and inclusions in the travelling squad. But there is maximum interest, obviously, in the availability of Rasmus Højlund and Luke Shaw, because both of them have been tethering very, very close to first-team action again. How do you anticipate this response, this necessary reaction to defeat on Saturday morning against Southampton?
I think a win is essential. As we said, it's 2 out of 3 defeats in the Premier League, 3 out of 4 competitively, and it is the easiest game of the next month, because after that it's Crystal Palace away, where United, of course, lost 4-0, probably arguably the lowest point of the season last season. I was at that game with my 2 United supporting children who are 16 and 19, and one made it to the 65th minute before leaving. 1 minute left it to the 80th. But in my experience, I thought, no, I've seen better times. I'll stay to the end, and I'm glad I did, actually, because that was that night where United's fans sang, gave them unconditional support. And I think that was paid back a few weeks later in the cup final. So that was interesting to view that. But yeah, I mean, that was on the pitch in the 90 minutes. United were absolutely dreadful, and losing to, a classic lower to mid-table team like Palace, 4-0. Then there's Tottenham, and then there's Aston Villa. So I feel to build some momentum, there's also winnable, 20 and Barnsley, there's winnable cup games around it. But I think absolutely essential to get a win against Southampton, because a draw is meaningless. A defeat would be a crisis, becomes an even bigger crisis. And I have had concerns about that fixture list. Southampton 3 out of 3 defeats. They'll want to bounce back. It's away. 12:30 games can always be a bit rusty sometimes. But with that fixtures list coming up, it's essential United build some momentum. And it's ridiculous, isn't it? We're 3 games into the season, 3 Premier League games, and we're talking like that. It's not what any of us wanted, expected after the afterglow of a cup final win and a good transfer window. But it's the Liverpool defeat was so depressing, because it was like nothing had changed, and Liverpool, almost like in that 5-0, and you have to think, well, was that the 5-0 or the 7-0? But there was the 5-0 at Old Trafford when Liverpool took their foot off the gas, and the same thing happened at 3-0. We've got our win, let's hold on to that, and it could have been 4-5. Obviously, Alexander Arnold had one, a millimeter offside. It could have been a lot worse. So. Yeah, I mean, you're building up a game in mid-September, but it's huge. It's absolutely huge, because you're thinking, if you can't go to Southampton and get a win, then what have we become? What does the future hold?
The thing that's so frustrating is the necessity for a reaction. I spoke with a man who's been there and done it and claimed the ultimate honours in Danny Simpson on this show a couple of weeks ago. And I made a point in saying to him that since the departure of Sir Alex, regardless who is in the hot seat, we seem to constantly speak about Manchester United needing a reaction. And I'm fed up of talking
Yeah.
about Manchester United needing a reaction. But it is the truth. And one thing that did stand out to me, and it was something that Danny said when we spoke. I asked about the nature of the defeat in the Community Shield, or the Charity Shield, as you said. And he made a point in saying he recalls playing in the Charity Shield against Manchester United for Leicester, and that they had got so accustomed to winning that when they came into the fixture against United, they got beaten in regular time. And then they went on and they lost their opener in the Premier League, and all of a sudden there was a sense of absolute capitulation and travesty inside in the dressing room that we've lost 2 games in a row. What the hell is going on here? He made a point in saying that he didn't think the United players were going to leave London that day and be overly disappointed with the fact that they were after losing because they didn't lose in regular time. He was of the opinion that they had played so well, and they'll be annoyed that they allowed City to grasp that equaliser so close near the end, but that there was a very, very good style of play. It was systematic, and that they would take that forward with them. And obviously then we saw that going on with Xerxes nabbing the winner against Fulham in the game that you were at the start of the season. But it's all about momentum. It's all about reaction. And I hate the fact that the game is on at 12:30 tomorrow morning, because it leaves ample opportunity for the entire weekend to be ruined. When you're looking at the players that are going to be coming through, and we don't quite know about a couple of availabilities, one person that is going to have a lot of talk about him was Matthias de Ligt, because obviously there was much made about his performances for the Netherlands against Bosnia and Germany in the Nations League. Now, by and large, it was 135 minutes of largely forgettable football from him. And even Ronald Koeman came out and advised that he substituted him at halftime against Germany to protect him. The United faithful are well known to back their own. You've referenced that Crystal Palace outing and the amazing away support that was there. Mental fortitude, as I wrote about recently, is a hugely important trait for any player at the Theatre of Dreams. And with many anticipating a formidable partnership between De Ligt and Lisandro Martinez, how do you view his integration back into Erik ten Hag's side, given that his first start was a 3-0 defeat to Liverpool, and then he's gone away and endured such torment on international duty? Do you think ten Hag will protect him, or do you think he's going to go back into the side alongside Martinez tomorrow?
I think he'll probably start. I don't think Harry Maguire has done much wrong, but I mean, De Ligt is very much Ten Hag's player, obviously from Ajax. Tried to sign him in when he arrived at the club. He finally got him, and also that. But this was other figures at Old Trafford were keen on him too. This was not just Ten Hag signing. I think those days are over now, really. So I think there's he's experienced enough, even though he's only sort of 25 or so, that he has to bounce back. And there's he can't do anything on the substitute bench. This is Ten Hag's player. He'll want to play him. This is a partnership with obviously Yoro out for a little bit more, and obviously still only being 18. This is a partnership he sees for most of the season. I think he's come round to liking Maguire. He does like Maguire. He does trust Maguire. He did. United would have sold Maguire a year ago to West Ham, and Harry Maguire had some good moments last season, and he is an England international, and he is a good player, a very good player. But maybe obviously with the purchase of 2 other centre backs this season, that tells you that Ten Hag looks beyond him. I think certainly De Ligt will start. And I mean, obviously Liverpool game wasn't great. His international break wasn't great, but those are a couple of games. We're not talking a run of 8, 9, 10 games. So I think he'll be welcome back and he'll start, because I think Ten Hag wants to start building his team, and Harry Maguire is a squad player. Is a squad player that fits in. He fitted in when De Ligt wasn't bought. It was obviously at the start of the season for the Community Shield. He was, and he came on as a sub against Fulham. So I think the quicker Ten Hag can play the starting 11 he wants to, the quicker he can get the results he wants to, and I think that involves De Ligt starting. So I expect that.
Goes down the line of what we saw last year, having to make so many rotations in the back line. He just wants stability, and he wants as much of a stable back four as he can get as soon as he can possibly get it. There's one thing I want to touch on from what you just said. it's a very short-term thing. That obviously goes hand in hand with what Dan Asher was speaking about, that you have to focus on medium to long term. You referenced that it's not an issue of 8 to 9 to 10 games. During this international break, one player that wasn't involved was Marcus Rashford. And we saw ample video evidence of the amount of individual sessions that he's putting in to try to get himself back in the forefront. A lot of people have just forgotten the qualities that he possesses. And admittedly, look, he's right to come under scrutiny based on the fact that he has had a difficult, probably more than 12 months at this stage now. But this is a guy that Erik ten Hag, Manchester United, believes still has the capabilities and the attributes to lead them forward and to really, really propel this Ineos vision into the future. I know it's impossible to know why he has come under such difficulties regarding his form. Like off the field, this is a guy who's very introverted. He's not as flamboyant as people believe that he actually is. And he has obviously had to deal with several off the field issues on top of the endless daily scrutiny that he has. As a supporter first, Sam, do you view him bouncing back from this and reclaiming the form that we saw of 2 seasons ago?
I mean, I certainly hope so. And I think he can, and I think he probably will. I mean, you don't score 30 goals as a fluke. And you don't get lucky with that. I mean, they were a huge array of goals. Obviously, his career high. I mean, and great goals in big games against big teams. He's a big team player as well. I mean, funnily enough, obviously, even last season, the goal he scored against City. I mean, it was early and City came back, but he scores in big games. That's why, in a way, I thought it was strange that Ahmad was dropped after being Player of the Month and scoring the previous week. But I felt you had to trust Rashford. And again, Rashford's not going to get better sat on the bench. And has his form been so bad to drop him? So I expect him to start at Southampton. Again, I think he got a lot of criticism, as he does as a local lad. There is that frustration that he did have a poor season. It hasn't seemed to have changed much. But I think if Xerxes was a little bit sharper or a little bit more luck, he could have had 2 assists with 2 fantastic crosses, pinpoint crosses that laid it on the plate for Xerxes, and one was saved and one went past the post. Frankly, he should have scored both of them, and it might not be enough to get United back in the game or get a point or whatever, but it would have showed some momentum. But it would also have helped Rashford. I think the worry for Rashford that game as well, it was the second half where he had, I think it was one Liverpool defender in front of him, and he in previous seasons he would have tried to go at him, drop a shoulder, get past him, and he stopped, checked, and went back, and United lost momentum. That was a concern. So the positive is those 2 crosses. The concern is that not trusting himself, and that's a worry that he's thinking. The best football is instinctive. You don't think, you just do it. You get in the zone. I mean, I've interviewed many footballers and sportsmen, and it's that rare moment where you're in the zone. And he spent a season in the zone, and he thinks too much now. He thinks, "What am I going to do?" I mean, one caveat is Luke Shaw was one of United's best players in 2022-23, and he really misses a consistent presence. The overlapping runs, pulling players out. United really suffered at left back. Famously, Wan-Bissaka was played at left back. Wan-Bissaka had limitations as a right back, certainly as a left back. And then Dalot does a good job there. Malacia is still injured. Mazraoui's we thought he was coming in as an interim left back. He started at right. So Dalot's there. It doesn't help. It doesn't help Rashford. It's not an excuse, but it's a factor. I still think he has. I mean, he was one of the best players in the world. 18 months ago, 30 goals, and in that season as well, he was great for England at the World Cup, underused by Southgate. He scored 3 goals at the World Cup, and always looked a threat, for United. But yeah, it's been sad to see, but I can see why Ten Hag persists, because if he's still at the peak of his career, probably got arguably the best years ahead of him. So it's not like the Casemiro argument where you think, well, if you can squeeze another year out of that, you'll be doing amazingly. But clearly, he's hit that point where you decline. Well, Rashford is 26, about approaching 27. So, as a striker in the modern game, he's got 5, 6 really great years ahead of him. And hopefully, as a local lad and a good person, they'll be spent at United scoring lots of goals. It is a bit of a mystery. I think it's a confidence issue. But I suppose you don't regain your confidence sitting on the bench. So I think like a lot of United fans. Well, I say a lot of United fans. There's a bit of fickleness where people can turn against him, but I really hope he comes back to what he was doing recently.
As do I, and I don't think you can ever truly gauge the nature of a fickle football fan base. You mentioned as well about the 30 goals he scored. He also contributed 10 assists that season, if
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
correct.
yeah,
And with those 2 passes that you said to Xerxes, absolutely, maybe not the most marvelous of performance on the day, but ultimately denied 2 assists, which would have been 2 further goal contributions. And that really sort of further emphasises a lot of the problems United have had in the opening 3 games, because they're 2 ahead of Arsenal and approaching double figures and big chances missed. And that's a
yeah,
huge, huge thing,
yeah,
So hopefully those little details iron themselves out. And hopefully, as a longtime supporter, admirer, and backer of Marcus Rashford, that he can reclaim some of that form that was truly spellbinding and had him in the same conversation as the likes of Kylian Mbappe. I know it
yeah.
seems like it's far gone now, but it was a
Deservedly so.
realistic
Yeah.
conversation and it was deserved.
Well, he's
Now,
what I mean. On the back of that season, he earned a new contract, which has made him one of the best paid players in the world.
exactly.
And nobody quibbled with that at the time. But yeah, unfortunately, he hasn't sort of lived up, fulfilled that his side of the bargain on the massive contract. But hopefully it will come.
Not yet. We'll say not yet, Sam. So the last thing I'll say, obviously, it's the definition of early days, and regardless of early disappointments, it's a marathon. We have a host of new players integrating into the squad. There's injured players returning, namely that of Luke Shaw, hopefully sooner rather than later, as you said, and plenty of opportunities for a successful campaign for Erik ten Hag, Manchester United, and the hundreds and thousands of supporters around the world. Given the signings, particularly that of new boy Manuel Ugarte, and the evident views of structure, improved performance throughout pre-season up until about 25 minutes of that Liverpool collapse, what are you expecting over the coming months for this side?
I I mean, I think I would be what am I expecting or hoping for? I mean, I think I'd be a genius if I could say what I'm expecting. I don't know because we don't know what to expect. I mean, nobody expected United to win the cup final, and they did, and they deservedly did, and that saved Ten Hag his job, and they beat one of the best teams in the world in a showpiece final with young players, and it was a fantastic moment. Well, I didn't expect that. I don't know if I enjoyed the final so much because it was after Mainu scored. I thought, oh, we've got to win this now. We're 2-0 up. You can lose a game when you're 1-0 up. That's fine, but 2-0, that's a disaster if you don't win it. And I don't think I enjoyed much of the game because I was thinking we have to hold on and win it because we're 2-0, and we did. And so no one expected that. So who knows? Who knows? There's major doubts about Ten Hag naturally. I think, and they come from within Ineos, within the club, because they interviewed and they spoke to many managers. It was a surreal summer in that sense because very openly they spoke to other managers. Now, normally when that happens, the manager loses their job, and that it's no big deal. But he kept his job, and they spoke to each other. So that really says we don't completely believe in you because we're scoping out who else we can get. In the end, on the basis one game, the cup final, and the fact that they weren't sold on any of the other candidates, that they stuck with him and hoped that the cup final was what he was capable. That was the real Ten Hag, and we'd like. Can we see more of that, please? Well,
Was it
sadly,
just that, though, Sam? Was it just that? Or was there a consideration for the amount of variables that were there, namely the amount of injuries? Because the injuries is something that a lot of people have glossed over, but that is a very real key factor and a massive contributor for many of the issues that Ten Hag encountered last
Yeah,
season.
do you know what? I'm one of those that, yes, of course, injuries are relevant, but they are part of football. They really are. Show me a squad that doesn't have an injured player at the moment, or two or three injured players. They are a part of football, and it's how you adapt to that. And you have a structure and you have an identity where you can fit players into that. It's not about we've got to get Martinez back, because without Martinez we can't break the lines, we can't pass through from defence. Well, you need other players that are capable of that. Maybe not to his level, of course. So I'm not. I didn't have much sympathy with that. I mean, it was frustrating, and the injuries were ridiculous last season. But I didn't have much sympathy with the argument that was the reason. You should have been a good enough coach, manager to adapt. You should have built a squad that can withstand injuries, because there's always going to be injuries. I don't know. The top of my head, the '99 Champions League final. United were missing half their midfield with Paul Scholes and Roy Keane. Okay, both suspended, not injured, but and United found a way to win. That's what the great coaches they do. They adapt to that. And I found it, always banging on about the injuries a bit tiresome. Everybody has injuries. I can't remember somebody. That's right. When United lost to Fulham in February. Fulham didn't have Paulinho. Their best player was injured. And they had about 3 or 4 players injured. Every team does. So it's how you adapt to it. So Ineos may have given them the benefit of the doubt. I don't. But I understand people that do. I get that argument. I'm less tolerant of it, though.
I was going to ask you, and I'm definitely going to ask you now, given all this. We look at Manchester United trying to make sure they balance the books for PSR. I know there's a lot of deductibles that people are unaware of when they see these figures being posted in terms of losses over X amount of months. Do you see Erik ten Hag in the job in 2025? And I'm going to expand on it ever so slightly, because whatever happened during the summer, the interviews that were given with various different candidates, namely Thomas Tuchel, they opted to increase his stay at the club by an additional year. So therefore, if you sack him, you are adding on additional compensation and severance packages that is going to go against further PSR, because there's a larger payoff. Surely this was not all taken into consideration, all categorized around the fact that we're going to hit the ground running and everything is going to go swimmingly up to December.
Well, yes, and I think Ten Hag doesn't have many places to hide, really, because United really provided him with most of of what he's wanted. No manager get everything they want in the transfer market. Of course, famous in his first summer, he didn't get Frankie de Jong. But United have gone above and beyond to provide for him, really, and trusted him. And so that can't be an excuse. And I feel, will he be there in 2025? I don't know. Is that January 2025 or December 2025? I don't know. I mean, I think if he can rediscover what worked for him in his first season, where the Carabao Cup, reaching a cup final, reaching the quarterfinals of the European competition, although that was a disastrous exit. It seemed to be 2-0 up with Sabitzer's 2 goals, and then from that was you actually go back a bit further. How many times have United played really, really well since the Carabao Cup final against Newcastle? And it really is a handful. And one of those happened to be the FA Cup final this year. So if he can rediscover what he did the majority of his first season, and there's very little cause for optimism from last season, I think the cup